The night was thick with silence. The stars hung over the desert, casting pale light over a small camp. Inside a tent, a man sat by the fire, lost in thought. This was Moses, the chosen one, the man sent by God to free his people from Egypt. But something was wrong. A sudden sickness gripped Moses. His breath became heavy, his body weak. He fell to his knees, clutching his chest. This wasn't an ordinary illness. It felt like death itself was upon him. Then Zipporah, his wife, saw it. This was no natural affliction. This was divine judgment. She knew in an instant what had been neglected. Their son was uncircumcised. With no time to waste, Zipporah grabbed a sharp flint knife. Her hands trembled as she took hold of their son. In an act of desperation, she performed the circumcision, cutting away the foreskin. Blood dripped onto the ground as she pressed it against Moses' feet. "You are a bridegroom of blood to me," she whispered. And just like that, the unseen hand of death lifted. Moses gasped for air, life returning to him. The judgment was gone. God had relented. To the Israelites, circumcision was not just a ritual. It was a sacred covenant between God and his people. Since the time of Abraham, every male child was to be circumcised on the 8th day as a sign of belonging to God's chosen nation. Genesis 17:10-14. It was a mark of obedience, a seal of divine promise. For Moses, the leader of Israel, failing to circumcise his son was a grave oversight. How could he lead God's people when his own household had not upheld the covenant? God's severe response highlights the seriousness of obedience, especially for those called to serve him. This strange and unsettling passage reminds us that obedience to God is not optional. Moses had received a great calling, but even he was not exempt from God's commands. Zipporah's quick action saved him, showing that even in judgment there is mercy. As we follow God's calling in our lives, are we neglecting any areas of obedience? Sometimes God's discipline may seem harsh, but it is always meant to bring us back to Him.